For that warm introduction, and thank you so much for having me here. First of all, I'm actually missing my weekly hockey game to be here, but it's an honor to be here. We still play hockey. And I think I'm actually a little intimidated talking over here. There's this beautiful spread of food. It smells delicious, and it said you have to listen to a lecture, so hopefully this will distract you enough that we'll hopefully be able to talk a little, learn a little together, and hopefully after that enjoy some of the delicious food that's here. I'd like to begin by sharing with you a story, a parable, about a professor who walked into his classroom and he handed out a piece of paper to each and every student. And on the piece of paper, in the center of the paper, was a little black dot. Okay? And he said, I want each and every one of you to look at this paper, and you have 10 minutes to write about what you see on this paper. And so all the students quickly got to work. Some of them started describing that dot as representing space. Some of them started writing about this dot as it represents infinity and the endlessness of the color black. Some of them started writing about the fact that this color, the dot, represents depression and darkness in their lives. And each and every student spent those 10 minutes writing furiously, trying to describe the dot that they found in the middle of the paper. As 10 minutes came up, the professor said, turn your papers over, hand them in, and tomorrow you'll get your grades. So they did. And the next day they come to class and he hands out the papers, and every student turns over their paper, and they each got an F. They all failed. So what's going on over here? How could that be? And he said, I can't believe you all. I said, I gave you 10 minutes, and you had a piece of paper, a very large piece of paper, 9 by 11, I believe, and there was one tiny little black dot in the middle. And you spent your entire time writing about the dot and ignoring all the white that was everywhere else. It's a cute story, but it's also a story that's very, very relevant in our lives. Because oftentimes it's very easy to look at the black dot in life. It's very easy to look at all the things that are going wrong in our life. And it's very easy also to ignore all the great white that we have, all the good things in our life that we so much take for granted. And before I'm going to talk, and like Yaakov said, there are a lot of terrible things going on in Israel right now. Terrible things in Israel, terrible things as we know across the world, both in terms of Islamic terrorism, in terms of movements fighting against Israel, trying to boycott Israel. But I think it's important to take a step back, and before we discuss what we can do about all those terrible things, to also appreciate the era that we're living in, to appreciate all the white that surrounds that black dot. Because if you think about it, if you look back 100 years, not even 100 years, of course, ignoring even, think of all the terrible things that have taken place before the past 60 years where we had all these acts of terror in the land of Israel. Think about the pogroms. Think about the fact that if right now there wasn't a land of Israel where people could come as refugees, imagine the Jews who are living in Iraq, Syria, they don't live anymore there. And if they would be there, unfortunately we know what would happen to them. The fact that they're able to come to Israel prevents so much from happening. The fact that there is an IDF, the fact that there's an army there protecting people, that protects people in Israel, as well as we know all the missions that they have, the covert missions they have around the world. There's so much to be thankful for. Just simply having the land of Israel, having it in our hands. The fact that we have the land of Israel in it is in and of itself a response to so many of the claims that have been made. I remember speaking to people living during the times of the Holocaust, living in America, and saying that every time they ride in a subway, Christians would turn to them and say, you see, your God hates you. Look what's happening to your people. And that person telling me that now no one can even dare open their mouth. He looks at what's happening in Israel. He looks at the rebirth of not only Israel, but of Torah study. And he says, there's no argument anymore. Imagine people who are saying that either God has forsaken you, or people saying there is no God, and you look at the miraculous events throughout the course of Jewish history that we have experienced, many of us, in our own lives. There's so much white. And yes, there is black, but we have to wake up every morning and thank God for the fact that we live in a time that so much good is happening to the Jewish people. That we're able to practice our religion freely, that people are able to live safely. There's so much white to be thankful for before we start talking about the past. And so that's the first point that I want to make, that we should appreciate the whites and not allow those dots of black to overtake us. that being said, I think it's, of course, important to also recognize when terrible things happen, that we have to respond in some way. The first thing we do, our knee-jerk reaction, in some ways, in some levels, is usually of desperation and hopelessness. I speak to people, and they tell me they see the things going on in Israel every time we hear about a new bombing or thank God, recently no bombings, but in terms of shootings, stabbings, it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. It's very easy to feel utterly hopeless. And whenever I think about those feelings, or when people talk to me about those feelings, I'm reminded of a beautiful Hasidic tale. There's a great Hasidic rabbi known as Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And he was very into introspection. He would encourage his students all the time to think deeply about themselves. That was one of his trademarks. Think deeply, learn about yourself. That was what he was all about. And he had this one student who was with him for many years, and all of a sudden, he stopped seeing him. He didn't see him for a very, very long time. And finally, he's walking down the street one day, he's walking through the market, and all of a sudden he bumps into the students. He says, Yassin, I haven't seen you in ages. What's going on? I haven't seen you in synagogue. I haven't seen you at the Torah study classes. Where have you been? And he said, I'll tell you the truth, Rabbi. He said, I took your advice. I started looking deeply inside of myself. And I found things that really scared me. I found some terrible things. I saw parts of myself that really disturbed me, and I recognized there's so much bad. I felt so terrible about myself. I felt so helpless. I felt like such a bad and dirty person. And he said, I just couldn't continue doing all those good things because I saw all of those dirty and terrible things. And the rabbi said it in Hebrew, I'll translate, he said, if you believe that you could destroy, if you believe that there's the capacity for evil, believe that you could fix, believe that you could rectify. And what he was invoking over here is a Kabbalistic idea, that we believe that whenever there is something bad, there has to be something that counters it, something that's positive, something that's good. And if you see bad inside yourself, there also has to be the capacity for great goodness as well. And that's true not only of ourselves as individuals, but it's true about the world around us. If we see evil, and boy oh boy, we've seen evil. We've seen such terrible things just in this past week, we all know. Such terrible things. But if such evil can exist, then we have to remind ourselves when we're faced with that there has to be the capacity for good. If you believe that you could destroy, if you believe that there could be evil, believe that there could be good as well. Believe that we could rectify, that we could fix those things. And so in that light, I want to talk about what we could do, how we could fix. We all know about all the terrible things going on. We all know about the terrible evil. The question is, what could we do? We sitting here in this room so far away from all that's going on, other than our blood boiling when we hear the news. Is there anything practical that we could do? That's the question that I'd like to approach and try to discuss as best as I can over the next few minutes. So I'm going to begin. I'll share with you a couple of different ideas. I'm going to start really with the most impractical of all, but something worth mentioning. There's a book, it's called the Kuzari. You ever hear of the book, the Kuzari? Familiar with the book? It's a great Jewish philosophical book. It's about a dialogue that took place between the Khazar king. The Khazar kingdom was a very prominent kingdom between the 9th and 11th century, actually in the place of the former USSR. Very powerful kingdom. It was really with a buffer between the Islamic areas as well as the Christian ones, and for a while a very, very powerful place. It's been noted, historians have backed this up, that at one point the nobility, the top, higher echelons of their society, converted to Judaism. And the question is why and how? How did that happen? How did that take place? Go check it on Wikipedia. It's true. Fascinating. But this very powerful kingdom, many of the higher-ups decided to convert to Judaism. And we have a tradition that that conversion took place based on a dialogue that took place between the Khazar kingdom. The Khazar emperor was someone who was a spiritual seeker. He was trying to find a path. He was trying to find a way of living a spiritual life. And he had a dialogue and debate with an imam, with a priest, with a philosopher, and ultimately with a rabbi. And through those conversations, he became a devout Jew. So in that book, there's ongoing dialogue, ongoing conversation. And at one point, after many conversations, this book which depicts this dialogue, the Khazar king, the emperor, turns to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I don't understand something. I've read your Torah. I've read your Talmud. We've been talking for months, maybe years now. I don't understand one thing. He says, everything is very clear in your Torah that Israel, the land of Israel, is so incredibly important. The rabbi in this book talks about the land of Israel as being a place that's the only one of the main place where we're really able to be spiritual, we're really able to connect to God. He says, I don't understand. He says, we're having this conversation in Kazan. You live in Spain, maybe, Rabbi. You don't live in Israel. How could that possibly be? That makes no sense. And the rabbi, who page after page, chapter after chapter, has a brilliant answer to every single question. Every question the Khazar king asks, he's there. Right away, gives a beautiful answer. But over here, the rabbi responds by saying, you know what? You're right. I should be in Israel. That is the place I should be. There's a tradition that the author of this book, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, who's living in the 13th century, actually went ahead and traveled to Israel after writing this book, because he recognized that that's the place he's supposed to be. There's certainly incredible value in living in Israel. There's no question about it. But I would argue that perhaps on some level, in light of everything that we see around us, if you were to ask our enemies what their goal is very simply, drive the Jewish people out of the land of Israel. Perhaps some other terrible goals as well, but that would be one primary goal. And in light of the inherent value of the land of Israel on its own, but in light of their mission, in light of their attempt, living in Israel is on some level the greatest response to what they are trying to do. It's not easy, it's not simple. There are many reasons that perhaps it would not be practical for us to live in Israel. Many of those reasons are justifiable. But at the same time, on the most, again, impractical level, sorry for starting here, but on the most impractical level, the most obvious response to people who are trying to kick us Jews out of Israel is for us to pack our bags, take our belongings, and go there, and tell them, no, we're here. We're here to stay. You know, something called facts on the ground. There's no greater way of fighting a war by putting facts on the ground. We're here. We live here. I'm sorry. This is our land. Again, it may not be so practical, but it's certainly something, food for thought. You know, I live here in America. I don't plan on leaving just yet, but it haunts me. It haunts me. You know, I have my grandfather in his memory be for a blessing. He was a Holocaust survivor. He made his way to Israel after the war. Actually, I was just telling someone, you know, after the war he got a visa somehow. He was able to get a visa to enter Israel with my grandmother. And on the visa, you're allowed to, once you had a visa, once you had a permit, you're allowed to go in, not only with you as a couple, but if you had any children, you're allowed to go in. And the problem was he was a newlywed, he had no children. But the Jewish agency wanted to make sure that as many Jews were getting into the land of Israel, Palestine at the time. So what he did is he grew a little mustache. And he had this guy who was actually older than him, come along with him, and he pretended he was his son. So he traveled through the border. He said, yeah, it's my son, of course my son. They started yelling. He said, look, you got the, you know, he said, look at this facial hair. Anyway, so he went with his fictitious son and made it into Israel. Anyway, he made it to Israel. He lived, I remember my father used to tell me about where he grew up. He grew up in, literally, I mean, they shared one apartment, one bedroom apartment with two families when we first came there. One bedroom apartment. I mean, hard to wrap your head around such a thing. Okay? Really, really difficult life. Finally, after years of struggling, was able to close. He started off as a worker in a factory, eventually built his way up, became the head of the factory. He had 3 children. His youngest child, unfortunately, was a soldier in '82. In the war in Lebanon, his tank got hit, and unfortunately he died in the process. My uncle was killed. And my brother told me, he was once speaking to my grandfather, and he said, you know, you could have made it to America. You could have gone to so many different places. My grandfather said, you know, it's true. It was difficult. It was hard. So many casualties, so many things I lost. But he said, I wouldn't do it any other way. He says, this is the way to do it. This is what I'm supposed to do. A Jew should be in Israel. So again, this may not be practical, but it's certainly something that's worth thinking about. And for those of you and those of us who are here in America, I'll share with you one story about a great sage, a great Torah scholar by the name of Rabbi Motzen, a great leader of the Jewish people, who lived in Israel for a short little while. He tried to start a yeshiva, a place to study in Israel. And for whatever reason, he had to make his way back to America. And when he did, he said, listen, if I can't live in Israel, at least let me remember that my true home is in Israel. And so what he did, he had a yeshiva in Cleveland. He had a place, and there was a dormitory where all the students lived. And he said, I'm not going to go back to my home. I'm going to live in the dormitory. That's where I'm going to live. I'm not recommending you all move to a dormitory, but it's a beautiful idea in the sense that he recognized this is not his home. His ultimate, real home is in Israel. So, again, I would start most impractically, but it's something that we can't escape, and that is that the land of Israel has its inherent value. The land of Israel, certainly living in Israel, has its response to terror, again in a very perhaps dangerous way, but it also is one of the greatest responses. That is the way that we fight on some level, simply by being there, by putting the facts on the ground. Living in Israel certainly carries a very large statement and is a very effective way, in some way, of responding to what's going on in Israel. But let's get a little bit more practical. I want to share three other approaches, three other possible things to think about when we think about Israel. The next thing I want to talk about is also something which is very practical, and something which we read about in this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, we read about Esau and Yaakov, Jacob and Esau, how they have this encounter. Yaakov is now coming to greet his brother Esau, and he's afraid Esau doesn't like him. Jacob, the younger brother, stole the blessings from his older brother. It's not a good idea, especially since his brother is a hunter-warrior. You don't mess with those types of people, okay? He's a redhead too, for all you redheads. My son's a redhead. I know you don't mess with redheads. I apologize. There we go, yeah? Right, yeah. You don't mess with redheads. My father's a redhead too, I know. So Esau is this redhead, very fierce individual, and Yaakov is now going to encounter him. He hasn't seen him in years, but he knows that Esau's really mad at him. And so he does a number of things. I'm going to talk about some of those things, but one of the things that he does is he plays politics. And politics back in the day, for much of our history, involved bribes. That's how you dealt with politics. Maybe some of you still remember that from living in certain places. That's how politics worked. I actually went to Russia a few years, not too long ago, and I don't know if this sounds crazy, but I was told, thank God this didn't happen, I was told if anyone gives you any problems, just take out some money from your back pocket. And yeah, sounds right. That's what happens. Even not too long ago. Anyway, but that's what Yaakov was doing. That was the way he played politics back then. But it's a message for all of us. Thank God nowadays here, at least in America, that's, I imagine, not the approach. And it's a very different world. There's a story in President Truman. They had this something called the President's Address. And what the President would do, they have this radio address where the President would address the people of America. The people would be able to come into contact. People wanted to hear what the President had to say. There would be this weekly address. It started with FDR, and it was continued by President Truman. Now, President Truman spoke to his different aides, and they were told that what's the best time to give an address? What's the time that everyone's home? What would you say? Friday night. Friday night, everyone's home after the long work week. Everyone's sitting at home. It's the perfect time for a weekly presidential address. And so he started. FDR had it during the week. President Truman decided to have this weekly address on Friday night. And there was this woman, her name was Mrs. Burrell. I don't even know her first name. But she took a pen and paper, and she wrote a letter to the President. Dear President, I respect you as a great politician, and it pains me greatly that every week I would love to hear your message to the people. But because I observe the Sabbath, because I observe Shabbat, I'm incapable of hearing your weekly address. I simply can't listen. I can't put my radio on. I can't listen to your weekly address. And it pains me greatly. Is there any way of reconsidering? So she sent a letter. I don't know if you ever send a letter to the presidents. You probably are not going to get a response anytime soon. It just doesn't happen. But this woman, a few weeks later, actually received a response from the President's office saying that the President received this letter and is considering your letter greatly. And a week later, you can check this out, a week later, if you look, the President's address was switched from Friday nights to Tuesday nights. Okay? Amazing thing. The power of, we have a voice. It's a very different country. She didn't slip a few Franklins in there, right? We live in a world where we do have a voice. We are able actually to participate in politics. We're able to lobby. It's a beautiful thing. Okay? It's a very, very wonderful thing. And if you were to ask me a very practical approach, instead of, again, just allowing our blood to boil, when things like this happen, Baruch Hashem, thank God, there are wonderful organizations out there. It's an organization that I'm personally affiliated with, APAC, which does incredible things, does very powerful things, and is one of the most powerful lobbies in the country. If you want to know how to practically help Israel, you all know the United States, incredible amount of aid, and to ensure that that aid stays, ensure that the protection is there when we unfortunately need it. Politics. Very simply, we have a voice. Like Mrs. Burrell had a voice, we have a voice. We're able to participate, we're able to lobby, we're able to support different groups that lobby, and that's, again, a very practical way of perhaps responding to the things we hear around the world. So that's approach number two. Again, approach number one, again, the impractical approach, be there. Stand there, show them that we have this land is ours, and they can't scare us. Second approach is to use our voice. Baruch Hashem, thank God we have that voice. We don't have to bribe people, we can speak up, we're entitled to our voice, and it's appropriate to use that voice here in America. The third thing I want to suggest is something that I didn't fully appreciate until one day, years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I was speaking in our shul in Tamid, and I was speaking about Israel, whatever, I don't know what was going on at the time, I was speaking about Israel. And we had a young woman, couple, who was visiting from Israel. I think he was, the husband was there for a postdoc, in one of the, wherever he was. And she was there in shul. She was standing in the back. I think she had just dropped off her kids at the group. She was kind of standing around the back, and she heard I was talking about Israel. She listened, and she came on me after. And she said, no, I never knew. She said, I lived in Israel all my life. I never knew that people in America care about us. And I can't tell you, she said, how important that is to me. I can't tell you how much that means to me to know that there are people who care. And if we could put ourselves in their shoes for a second. I don't know if you've ever been to Israel, okay? But if you've been to Israel, and imagine the lifestyle over there. Whether it's times like this where people are literally afraid to walk outside their doors, or whether it's other times every time you walk into the central bus station you have to go through metal detectors and people searching all your bags. It's a very difficult life. There's a reason Israelis are hardened. You have to just kind of roll with the punches. But to know that there are people who care. When we go through difficult times and someone tells us, I'm looking out for you, that makes a big difference. It makes a very big difference. So I want to read you a letter. It's a letter that actually during this, whatever you want to call it, what's been going on in Israel, with all those knife attacks and all of that, and really scaring people from actually going and leaving their homes, dropping their kids off. In nursery, I'm speaking to a friend, he said, my wife doesn't want to send her kids to school. She just wants to stay home. How can she take the kids to nursery? Who knows what's going to happen? She can't go out. So I want to read you a letter, just to emphasize how much an effect it makes to literally reach out and tell people, whether it's people you know, or someone trying to reach out to others, even though you don't know, to let them know that you care. I'm going to read you a letter. Over the last week, there's a letter from a woman who lives in Israel. Over the last week, I've gotten various emails from family, friends, and students in the U.S. reaching out to tell me that they are thinking of me and my family during this horrible and very difficult time in Israel. It means a lot to me, and to everyone here to know that we are being thought about. That other people are thinking about us, and thinking about what it must be like to live here right now. No one here wishes that our loved ones would truly understand what we are going through. But when someone writes and says that it's hard for them to just go around their normal life, just go about their normal life in America, because they can't stop thinking about the changes in our day-to-day life here in Israel, it means a lot. It means that you really care. It means that you don't just sympathize, but you empathize. It means that you're really imagining the thoughts that are running through our minds around the clock, and the little things that we just can't believe are part of our day-to-day life right now. It means you may have realized that I drive to work with my doors locked, my windows closed, my cell phone set on the number of the local security command center, and my pepper spray next to me in the car. It means you may have realized that I sleep with a knife in my night table drawer. It means you may have realized that I have a conversation with my husband about what should happen with our kids, God forbid, and then wrote it down in my file cabinet, because we don't yet have a formal will. I thought it was crazy, until I heard that lots of other people have done similar things. It means you may have realized that I was sent a short movie by Magen David Adom about how to treat a stab wound. It means you might have realized that I watched a video on how to defend yourself against someone stabbing you, and then sent it out to everyone I know. It means you may have realized I was sent protocol from the Yishuv about what to do if someone is trying to shoot at your car. It means you may have realized that I haven't shopped at my typical supermarket in 2 weeks, because I can't yet bring myself to enter a store where Palestinians shop freely. I don't want to pick out my potatoes with one hand on my pepper spray. It means you may have realized that I thought twice and 3 times about whether I should let my 3rd grader go on his class trip today. I watched him leave my house, gave him extra kisses, and had extra thoughts in my prayers, but I don't want to raise him to be scared. It means you may have realized that I've wondered whether the various Israeli Arabs that we have worked with in different capacities over our time here, and had such nice relationships with, are going to appear in the news any day. We thought they were peaceful, until we saw one of them had a picture on his phone of the light rail being stoned. It means you may have realized that I had to share with my son more than I would have, because one of the men who was fatally stabbed was his classmate's uncle, and the school let us know that the psychologist will be meeting with the class. It means you may have realized that I have a sister who now has doubled her driving time to Jerusalem, because the old route she took is more concerning. It means you may have realized that I just wish I could stay in Alon Shvutz all day. Ironically, the well-secured Yeshuvim are the safest place you can be right now. And yet, if you also thought hard, and you know me well, you may have realized also that I don't regret our decision to make Aliyah for a second. You may have realized that I have a merit to be living in the place where Jewish destiny plays out before our eyes. You may have realized that I know I'm in a place where I'm supposed to be. My kids know it too. They have not once asked to go back. They live with a fierce commitment to the values our ancestors lived and died for. They actually understand the Hebrew words they pray daily and thank us for bringing them here, the place they mention in prayers all the time. It means you have realized that I have bitachon, trust, that I'm in God's hands, that He's in control, That if He wants something to happen or not happen, it doesn't matter where I am. That He knows what is best even if we don't always understand. It means you may have realized that I have faith that eventually things will improve, that this will also pass, and that we will wake up to a brighter day. It means the people of Israel are strong. I smiled and then I cried today when I saw two teenage girls standing in the middle of the big traffic circle, all alone, just swinging huge Israeli flags out there in the exposed open because they wanted to send a message. For many of us, it's our kids who keep us strong. Some of us have kids who are chayalim, who are soldiers, who couldn't come home for Shabbat when they were supposed to because of the situation. Yet they go out to serve their country proudly and bravely and without complaints. I have younger kids, but today I heard one kid tell another that we need to be working on our character so that God look upon us and all of the Jewish people favorably. That gave me strength. It made me feel a little stronger. It gave me something to do because there's not much else we can do. So if you're thinking about us, pray a little harder, learn a little extra, be a little nicer, give a little more charity, work on your midot and your characteristics just a little bit. And let us hope God looks upon us favorably and says, enough is enough. Thank you for thinking about us. It means a whole lot. The strength of that woman just jumps out from every word that she writes. Clearly, an iron will. And yet, the fact that she knows that there are people who care. The fact that she receives those emails, those calls, those concerns, questions, gives her strength. That gives her power. That gives her the ability to keep on going. So one of the many things that we could do, if you know anyone in Israel, if you have family in Israel, distant family in Israel, friends in Israel, anywhere in Israel, to call them, to email them, to send them a letter, to let them know that we're praying about them, to let them know that we care about them. There is nothing more powerful. There's nothing that gives a person more strength than to know that they're cared for. I think this letter speaks to that point in a very, very powerful way. The last point that I want to focus on is probably what's most in our hands to do. It's something that, unfortunately, we sometimes lose sight of because there's so much else to do. You know, when we're talking about Israel over here, so in the short history of Israel, we've always had to turn to others to ensure the stability and the security and strength of Israel and the Jewish people. For the establishment of the State of Israel, we have to turn to the UN. There's a lot of lobbying, a whole lot of lobbying, incredible history that went into what went on over there. A miracle. The fact that they all actually voted, or enough people voted, to establish the state. But we had to turn to the United Nations, ironically, right? So now we don't know who they are. After that, America was not so interested in helping us, whether it was turning to Russia, actually, to France, and eventually as the tide changed, we turned to the US for support. In more recent times, the Israeli army turns to sophisticated defense. And we know that right now, any Iron Dome is not necessarily going to help us. We know that extra funding won't necessarily help us either in Israel. We know the United Nations certainly won't help us, they only make things worse. And what we do know, the only thing we could have is something, there's an image I have, a video actually, that I just, every time I see, I'm filled with pride. I just get such a feeling. There's a video of a group of soldiers on their way, the last confrontation, the last time the soldiers were sent over to enemy lines. And they're sitting there about to go into battle. Now, the Israeli Defense Force is one of the most sophisticated armies out there. These soldiers are well-trained, well-oiled machines. And there's a video of them as they're right there, right at the doorstep of the enemy lines, walking into the enemy. And you look at these faces and you remind yourself, they're little kids. They're little kids. They're 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds. They're little kids. And while they're big and strong, you can see the look of fear on their face. And on this video, there's a group that comes and starts playing music. And the music, the song they're singing, is Ein lanu amin yisha'en. We have no one to rely upon. We have no one else to place our faith in. Ella alavinu shabashamayim. Except for our Father in heaven. And these soldiers are dancing and dancing with such fervor. Because they know that's all they have. They know that yes, they can have the most sophisticated weapons, they can have the night goggles, they can have the best training in the world, but at the end of the day, the only thing they have is Avinu Shabashamayim. The only thing they have to really do is place their trust in God. And so they do. And that's what we could do. Because at sometimes, yes, we have to do the politics. Yes, perhaps we have to place some facts on the ground. And yes, it's nice to reach out. But we also have to help them. And the way we help them is by reaching out to God, by recognizing that it's only with God's help that we're able to do anything. And we could try all we want, but without God, it's meaningless. You know, I'm reminded of a young story. A little boy walking with his father on a narrow path, and they're walking and walking. And they come to a place in this path, and there's nowhere to move. There's this big rock, this huge rock blocking their way. And the father turns to the son and says, "Son, I want you to move the rock." He says, "Okay, Daddy asked me to do so." He pushes the rock. Not happening. Can't do it. He says, "Dad, I can't do it." And the father says, "Son, I asked you to move the rock. I want you to move the rock." And the son goes and he's pushing, he's pushing, he's pushing. Nothing. The kid doesn't move. And again, he turns to his father and says, "Abba, Daddy, I can't do it." And the father says, "You have the ability to push this rock. You have the power." The son says, I don't have the ability." He says, "Push it." And the son pushes the rock, pushes and pushes all his might. And he just collapses on the floor and he's crying. He says, "Daddy, what are you doing? I don't have the ability to push this rock." And the father turns to his son and he says, "You missed something, my son. Because I'm here, and I'm your father. And whatever you need to do, I'm here for you to help. All you have to do is ask." We have to push. We have to do all we can do, but we also have to turn to our Father in heaven. We have to pray. And we have to create a partnership with Him. You know, our sages teach us that when something's going on in the world, even if it's across the world, but we're an organism, we're one people, we're one unit. And if we do something good, whether it's praying, whether it's giving charity, whether it's studying more, increasing spirituality in our life, that is our way of contributing. That's our way of getting God's involvement. That's our way of asking God. We ask God by showing Him that we care, God. This is important to us. We are changing our lives, God, because we see something terribly wrong. And if we change ourselves, God, can you see that as us trying, asking you, begging you to please help us? That's what we have to do. You know, we've been around the block way too long as Jewish people to think that the only solution is purely political, is purely material. The fact that we're sitting in this room defies all possible logic. I don't have to tell you all. The fact that we are here, the fact that you're here, you know, I'm inspired talking, you know, just every time I hear about anything Rabbi Motzen is doing. Our history is bizarre. Our history is crazy. It doesn't add up. It's not logical. We have so much God involvement in our life. To not recognize that is just closing our eyes and hiding from the truth. And so when we face hardships, when we feel a little more empowered these days, we have our own states, we have an army, we also have to recognize that without asking God for help, we don't have anything at all. You know, in recent time, in ancient times, excuse me, when the people needed to change, the prophets would come, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and they would walk into the streets of Jerusalem, or wherever the people lived, and tell them, "Guys, there are armies in Assyria, there are armies in Egypt. It's time to change your ways. You may feel comfortable over here, but it's time to change your ways." And the prophets would try to inspire them by letting them know of all the possible dangers around them. You know, we don't have prophecy nowadays, but we don't need prophecy. We open the news, we watch what's going on across the world. We know the dangers. That's our prophecy. And the prophet's goal is to wake us up. The prophet's goal is to shake us and say, "Guys, people, change. Do something. Don't just sit there." Yes, we can't necessarily fight physically. Maybe we could try to engage our congressmen, our senators to help us out. But you could do something. And when we change spiritually, that is our way of asking God to help as well. When we do anything, there's no specific action item. Whether it's prayer, whether it's charity, any mitzvah, any change, we all know what our struggles are. It's all so incredibly subjective. We all have areas, we all have shortcomings. When we change ourselves, that is our way to help the Jewish people. We're not that far away. Yes, we may be physically far away, but ultimately when our souls are connected, and when we change ourselves, that elevates the entire people, and that is a way of asking God for help. And so to sum up, I would say that again, when we face those hardships in Israel, there are a number of things we have to do. The first thing, when we see terror around the world, is to recognize, see it in context. It's a dot, maybe sometimes a big dot, but ultimately it's a dot on a beautifully white, crisp paper. Thank God. Thank God there's so much good in the world. We are the recipients of so much positive, such an amazing life that we have. The second idea is that if you believe that there could be evil in the world, we have to believe that there's positive. It's true about us as individuals, but it's true about the world at large. We have to have hope. Third, again, impractical, but something to think about, is showing up in Israel, living in Israel, actually making Aliyah and living there, and in some way negating the attempts of our enemies. The fourth is to participate on any level with the politics. Like our ancestors did, we recognize there's value. We have to do what we have to do to help out. And we recognize that lobbying does play a significant role. The fifth thing is to let people know that we care. To reach out to others. Reach out, let them know that we truly feel for them. And it's not just a nice thing to do, it gives them strength, it gives them the ability to keep on doing what they're doing. And the last thing is to turn to God. To turn to God in prayer, to turn God in a way of changing our lives, to listen to that voice of the modern day prophets, to listen, to read the news and be inspired, not just read it and post it on our Facebook page and say, look at these terrible people, do something. To actually take it to heart and change ourselves. That is the most important and most fundamental thing we do. We know that that is the only way we're here. We're only here because of God. And that's the only way we'll continue to do so. And we could contribute. We could contribute by changing our ways. I was going to stop here, but I just want to share with you something that just absolutely blew my mind. A friend of mine is on his way to Israel. He's leaving to Israel. And he told me on Thursday he's going to be somewhere very special. You may have heard last Thursday, I'm blanking on my days now, but there was a terrible, terrible tragedy, a terrible murder that took place. Someone opened fire on a car driving, not the young boy that was, not the one that happened this past Thursday, but a week before that. It was actually a father and a son, and they were traveling to the celebration for the week before their daughter and brother and sister's wedding. It was the father and the brother of the kala, of the bride, who were killed. Imagine that. Imagine the kala, imagine the bride. The week before her wedding, her father and her brother are killed. And she posted a message, made a little video, this woman. She was sitting in Shiva, okay? She was mourning. And she posted a message, she said, look, she said, we have to push off our wedding in a few days. You can't have a wedding during the period of mourning. But as soon as the period of mourning is over, we are going to have a wedding celebration. But we changed our venue. We're supposed to be in some small wedding hall in Israel, some tiny little place. And instead, they rented out a place known as the Binyanei Ha'omah. It is one of the biggest location venues. Okay, think of the, whatever they have where the Nationals play. It's a huge, huge, huge place, the Binyanei Ha'omah. And she publicly on this video invited the entire Jewish people. She said, I want every Jew to come and celebrate. Because we may not live on as individuals. We may lose people, there's casualties in our ongoing struggle, in our ongoing battle to do what's right and positive. But we as a people will live on forever. And we as a people are going to celebrate together at that wedding. My friend told me, I would love to be there. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? Imagine that. She said, I want there to be 1 million people celebrating with me at my wedding. Because we will live on. The Jewish people will live on. And that ultimately is the message. We cannot despair. We have to recognize that we are part of something greater, something grander than our own personal lives, and recognize we're part of an incredible and majestic history, marching towards something more positive, and we play a contributing role. We are part of a Jewish people. We're all celebrating at that wedding because we're all marching towards something larger. And that's our goal, to recognize that we don't have individual lives. We are part of a larger and grander nation. And our goal is to do something about that. Our goal is to contribute in a positive way to the ongoing history of the Jewish people. God should bless all the Jewish people here in Israel, all around the world, the whole world. Peace, security. So shalom b'marav, God who makes peace up in the heavens should make peace down here as well. Here be Aminu. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Motzen.
Thank you.
Questions, we'll take questions. I'm really, there's no breath left in me. But would you take
Yes, sure.
if anyone has any questions?
Yes.
I have 2 questions. So when is that wedding?
Thursday evening.
Okay.
Skip your Thanksgiving
Right,
dinner. It's much better.
And secondly, what is a good, reliable news source for this gathering?
It's like I have 2 brothers who live in Israel. One of them told me what he does in Israel is he goes, without naming any names, but he goes to the most left-leaning paper, and he gets the most right-leaning paper, and then he makes up something in the middle. Because unfortunately everything's biased. I mean, that's the nature of us human beings. We're all biased. I wish I could tell you. I mean, I think we could make a, not being recorded over here, right? We could certainly know who's not sees things in a totally warped way. I don't know, I guess Israel National News is pretty good, but I don't know, it's hard to tell. But when people, right, when you hear about a terrorist attack and they talk about the terrorist as one of the many casualties, it's probably time to find another news source. That's my bar.
Maybe we can Google that by keywords.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I also had it.
Okay, I guess I'm the person standing between you and your
Yes,
food
thank
right
you
now, so
very
I'm going to
much.
step away.
And it was not difficult at all. There was no challenge. I mean, food smells good, but thank you very much.
Hi. How are you? Thank you. How's it going?